Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the I Believe podcast. I'm Megan. Today we have a wonderful guest. We have Tessa Parry-Wingfield. Hi, Tessa.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Welcome to the podcast. Tessa is an ocular melanoma patient and she is here for another patient story. So, Tessa, tell us the beginning. How did they find it? When did they find it? Give us the backstory.
Yeah, well, this was like properly out of the blue, and I know everyone probably says that, but the speed in which everything happened was quite extraordinary. I had never heard of ocular melanoma, as many people I'm sure will empathize. So I was out running, jogging along the river here in the outskirts of London. I'm in the UK, based in the UK, and just like a really normal day, like it's a grey day. I'm plodding along, not particularly fast, and I'm very short-sighted anyway. So it's very normal for me to have I suppose, adjustments in my strength of my myopia prescription. So I just noticed some slightly odd vision issues. Didn't seem like normal ones, but I just was like, something's not quite right. It felt like my eyes weren't working together, which it sounds really strange and was quite a hard sensation to describe to people. But I just immediately went to my local optometrist, as I often do, just to, I thought, get a prescription tweak in my contact lenses. And, I still got my coat on. It's a cold day and I haven't bothered to take my coat off because I just thought I'd be in and out. And they start looking really deeply in my eye and getting all sorts of horrible, but now I associate them with horrible lenses out and trying to look into the back of my eye and all around my eye. Then the lady who had seen me said, I'm just going to go and get my colleague. And my heart started racing because I think once you get a second opinion, that's when you know things are probably going a bit awry. The other woman came in, thoroughly looked in my eye and sort of nodded and went, yes, there's something there. I'm on my own, got my coat on, have no idea what's about to come. And they're like, there's something in your eye. There's like a shadow cast. It's unusual. You need to urgently go to an eye hospital. It could be a choroidal freckle on your eye, which, as it transpires, it probably could have been originally something like that, or ocular melanoma. And all I knew was melanoma, skin melanoma. So I said, oh, cancer. And they went, we're really sorry that these aren't the words you wanted to hear. And I'm just sort of sitting there going, literally, what is happening? And they're like, but we can't diagnose as optometrists. You do need to go and see specialists. So I actually was presenting for International Women's Day, like comparing, hosting a day near me. So interviewing people, have had that whole day's worth of events that I was hosting the next day. So naively, I just put it off for another day because I'm thinking they probably got it wrong. Like it's, highly unlikely. But actually the Suburban Eye Hospital was calling me all day while I was trying to get this International Women's Day event over and done with, and going, you urgently need to come in. I'm like, okay, I'll come in, first thing tomorrow morning. So I was starting to get really scared. I obviously brought my husband with me, and they did some scans. Actually put up this massive scan on the wall, and what I could see was that just a black shadow. It was so sort of foreboding and terrifying. From like just running on a normal jog along the river to suddenly you're in an eye hospital when your eye is basically like a shadow. And then I went into a room and they said, look, we think this is ocular melanoma. We can't diagnose. You need to go and see a cancer, an eye cancer specialist. And so then came, only a few days wait. I'm so lucky that I didn't have to wait long, because when you're in that kind of mode of terror and horror and super scared about it all, you kind of want things to happen quickly, although you don't really, because you want to carry on with normal life, but you do need to know what's going on. And so a few days later I saw an ocular oncologist, words I never heard of in my life before, who was amazing, but delivered some terrifying news, which is, yes, the tumor is sizable, and so sizable that we need to remove your eye, and that has to happen really quickly, because we're kind of in the danger zone. And how many children have you got? You've got to go off now for all your kind of PET CT scans of your entire body to see if it's spread, all these kind of scary moments, really. And I'll see you in 2 weeks' time for the enucleation, which is just such a horrendous word, surgery, which is obviously removal of the eye. So yeah, off I trotted and went for the scans, and and awaited my fate, which was the surgery at Moorfields, which is the prominent eye hospital in London.
That's got to be so terrifying to go from nothing to, oh, we're just going to take your eye out.
I think I suppose the normal way we hear of like cancer diagnoses, normally you have some sort of symptoms like pain or tiredness or maybe loss of weight, or the stereotypical kind of cancer symptoms. And it was scary that I didn't have anything, and it was just it wasn't like a build up of vision issues that I'd ignored, or it was just that one day where I went, oh, things are a little bit odd. And it's just lucky that I acted really quickly as well. I went to my opticians and sort of got them to check it out, and that they could in fact see, because actually in the UK, and I don't know what it's like in the US, but my ocular oncologist said, a normal optician wouldn't necessarily have the kit that's kind of extensive enough to be able to find these things. And yeah, so it was lucky that at that moment, I mean, there were times now I look back that I did have a few symptoms, which we can go into if you want, but they were things like I had a little bruise on the front of my eye. And I went in a couple of times actually, but it was put down to being a contact lens wearer and, bruising my eye, which, now I think about it, you kick yourself, because is that a thing? Like, I don't, how violently am I putting my contact lenses in? I've worn contact lenses since I'm about 10, and I'm 47 tomorrow. So I'm quite experienced, let's say, at putting contact lenses in. So just stuff like that, trusting your instinct. I probably should have acted sooner on that. But I suppose if someone says, no, all fine, and look in your eye and seems fine, off you go, you don't really, act on it. So really scary, going from a seemingly just very normal life, albeit a bit of a mole with quite short-sighted vision, to 3 weeks from the run, 2 weeks from seeing the ocular oncologist, to having my entire left eye removed. Just sort of just going, what on earth has just happened? But also the scary implications of the diagnosis.
Absolutely. Well, first, I'd like to say happy birthday tomorrow. Thank you for
Thank you.
being here to share your story for your birthday. That's wonderful. And then also, I'd like to add the bruise thing. I understand where you're coming from, because how many times have you looked down at your leg and found a bruise and been like, I have no idea where that came from? So if a doctor or some kind of a professional told me, yeah, that's just because you put your contact in, I would believe it. Why wouldn't you believe it?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not a blame game, and I blame myself, I suppose, for mostly for, but hindsight's a wonderful thing, right? And it really didn't, there was no pain. It didn't seem like a significant thing, but it was over a period of quite a few years where a tiny bruise would appear, and then it would disappear, and then it would appear again. And I guess my message is to anyone listening to this, I mean, probably people listening have got an ocular melanoma diagnosis, or know people who do, but, if someone's listening to this and don't, I just think any tiny symptoms, it's your eyes, it couldn't be more important in your body and your life. So, just any kind of niggles or things that, you feel like maybe needs a second opinion, to just go and get that second opinion. I wish I had.
Yes, and I've never heard of bruising as an ocular melanoma symptom before. So I'm actually very glad that you brought this to our attention.
It was like a tiny blue dot. So it's not like a bruise as we know it. It's like almost like where the blood vessels are almost gathered and kind of broken onto the whiteness of the eye. It's tiny, and slightly blue. But my oncologist has since said that was probably the tumor sort of manifesting in a way.
Aura Biosciences is a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on developing precision therapies for solid tumors that aim to preserve organ function. Our lead candidate, Belsar, is currently in late-stage development for primary choroidal melanoma and in early-stage development in other ocular oncology indications and bladder cancer. Our mission is to grow as an innovative global oncology company that positively transforms the lives of patients. For more information, please visit us at aurabiosciences.com.
So
they removed your eye. How long ago was that?
So that was March 2023, 2.5 years ago. It seems like, in a way, like so much has happened. My life has changed like in extraordinary ways. Not all of it bad, by the way, and maybe we'll go on to that. But yeah, that's sort of flown by. But I suppose the time around the surgery and the recovery period is almost like everything's in slow-mo because I had to, and as anyone listening to this who's had the same surgery, and again, I don't know the difference between the UK and the US, but for me, when I had the surgery, I had 7 weeks where I just had a conformal lens in my left eye, no actual eye and no prosthetic in my eye to allow for the healing, of course. And I just wore incredibly glamorous, incredibly dark glasses. And so I could, it was really important for me that I was able to go about my daily life, see friends, walk in the park, get exercise and go about unnoticed because I wasn't ready to tell anyone really. My husband, I think, told our group of need to know close friends, and I told my family. But other than that, it was so shocking, and it happened all so quickly. I didn't really feel like spreading the word. It was actually really important for me that it could be kept a secret so that I could go about my life freely while I healed. So just really big, really glamorous glasses, and it happened to just be really hot and sunny in the UK between March and kind of May, which was really lucky. And then after 7 weeks, I had an interim prosthetic. And, just again, all these things that you've never even heard of. I've never met anyone with ocular melanoma. I've never ever met anyone who's lost their eye. I've never met anyone with an eye prosthetic. So you're going through all these, not only a cancer diagnosis and terrifying implications, the surgery is not particularly nice, although actually quite quick, and the recovery is quite rapid compared to what you, I suppose, mentally feel like you're going through, or what it should be like. The sort of not having any reference point was very, very difficult, and doing all these first. So, you walk into the prosthetics department at Moorfields, which is, as I said, in London, it's like the UK's main eye specialist centre. And it's just a whole new world. And it's sort of like you're in like some sort of fictional novel. Like it's so strange, but amazing, kind people really help all that. And my prosthetic expert, Peter, ocularist, is amazing and so kind and made you feel so comfortable. I then had an interim prosthetic for a period of time, which I found actually more challenging than not having an eye, because it wasn't the right one for me. It was just what they had in the drawer, and it was the kind of blue, but it wasn't my match, and it was just, so that was quite confronting cosmetically, I suppose. And then finally, I guess, and now I'm not remembering the timelines really accurately, but about 3 months later, I was able to have my sort of bespoke eye, which was, which is what you see today, which is kind of as good as a replica of my real eye as they could get. So yeah, that's a huge journey in itself, let alone the kind of health journey, I suppose.
Oh, for sure. And I always am so impressed how great of a job they do matching it to the real eye. Like, I mean, they are works of art.
Yeah, and actually, so Peter, my ocularist, he's basically an artist by trade. He's just a very visually amazing, acute person who can create these works of art on acrylic, essentially. And actually, and I don't know if it's the same in the US, but the technology around prosthetics hasn't really advanced, I'm told, in the last 50 years. So, it's nothing really avant-garde or pioneering, but actually, interestingly, I was put through a trial for prosthetics for a 3D printed eye, and I don't know if you have those, but it's brand new. So my oncologist was behind some of the research and development around it and getting it off the ground, and it was a kind of trial, and I was put into the trial actually, and I went through for the moldings, and then the 3D printing was going to happen in Germany. But unfortunately, something happened along the way. I can't remember if it was like a supply chain issue or a lack of funding. But unfortunately, just when I thought I was going to get hold of this sort of new 3D printed eye, which was going to be more accurate than ever because it would be exact replica, sort of scientifically be able to take an exact copy, so size, color. It would also layer on the colors, so there would be more depth to the color rather than just kind of surface on top. Yeah, really, really clever, and I'm sure that's where the future will be going, and we'll see that come out. The problem is it's such a niche cancer, right? And so it's the funding's not there like it would be perhaps for more mainstream cancers. That is an issue, and it's a cosmetic thing. It's not a saving lives thing. So I guess in terms of the priority list, but I'm pretty sure my ocular oncologist, Professor Sagu, will do everything he can to get that off the ground, because actually, even though it is just cosmetic, it is so incredibly confronting. And anyone who's listening will empathize, who's been through this. It's so much to go through, and then you can't like look at people, or you've got to get used to looking. I mean, it's just the most extraordinary turn of events and challenging scenario to go through all at once, and it's so life-changing. So I do think that any advances in sort of prosthetics would be an amazing help to people going through this, and I think that's probably where it's going. So yeah, I nearly got my hands on a 3D printed eye, which I know would have been one of the first 100 or something in the UK, but it hasn't quite happened yet.
I have not heard about 3D printed eyes yet, so that's fascinating.
Castle Biosciences is a proud sponsor of this I Believe podcast. Castle's innovative uveal melanoma tests provide valuable information about the risk of your eye cancer spreading to help you and your healthcare team individualize the management of your disease. To learn more, visit castlebiosciences.com.
It is true, the funding issue, absolutely. I think being rare is just hard, and so that's why we try so hard to advocate and get it out there. So again, thank you for being here and telling us all about this, because this is all so helpful for the whole cause and trying to get that spotlight that we really, really need.
Yeah, I think and Ocular Insight is doing amazing things in this respect. I think, and it's a difficult one, isn't it? I write quite a lot about my experience because I was a journalist for 10 years and I'm in communications actually now. So I feel really, and PR, and I feel really strongly about, I guess, the story around ocular melanoma, the messaging, I think can be quite confronting around cancer in general, middle-aged cancer. I think certainly in the UK, the UK media is notorious for, sensationalizing things, but there's a huge debate at the moment, rightly so, about why there's been such a spike in midlife cancer diagnosis around certain cancers, not ocular melanoma, which has stayed, according to my oncologist, fairly steady actually over the past few decades. But you can't help, as a consumer of news, feel that sort of shame and blame sometimes, like you've done something wrong, you've got too much cortisol or inflammation in your body, you've eaten too much sugar and all this stuff. And so I've sort of been on a bit of a mission to try and change and challenge some of the stereotypical narratives and views around the cancer, the sort of more generic cancer conversation. But yes, I think education and awareness raising, and one of the messages, or not messages, but one of the, I suppose, key aspects of something I feel passionate about is, just because you get a rare cancer, do you have less right to survive and live and have access to medication? Skin melanoma over here, I keep comparing, sorry, but I really don't know the landscape in the US, so I wouldn't want to say with authority, but over here, skin melanoma, we've had extraordinary breakthroughs. I mean, unbelievable. So immunotherapy developments over here for skin melanoma, like there's never been, it sounds a really crass way of saying it, but there's never been a better time to get skin melanoma because of this access to this amazing immunotherapy, which is saving so many more lives and prolonging the lives of thousands of people. Ocular melanoma, there are clinical trials, of course, going on, and I know that Ocular Insight is very much involved in raising funds for all those kind of things, I'm sure, and education, but it still doesn't feel like it's in the mainstream or particularly accessible. It feels like it's sort of far behind, if you like, and that's to do with funding, and funding ultimately is to do with priority. And so there is I guess a very poignant question. If you have a rare cancer, should you be any less have a right to live less, or less likely to survive, if you like?
I completely agree. We are very underfunded, and it is something that we're fighting for, and we're making strides, but it's hard. It's an uphill battle for sure. And I agree with everything you said. Yeah, I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, so we've just got to bang the drum and do what we can. I think, to my point of, I'd never heard of ocular melanoma, ocular oncology, ocular oncologists, enucleation, ocularis. I mean, it's and there's only about 600 cases in the UK of ocular melanoma a year. It's so rare. And yet I got a call about a year after my surgery from a friend who lives in my area. And she said a friend of hers was going through the same situation as me with her right eye, so the other eye to me. And I was like, oh, I mean, it is so rare. I really don't think so. This woman lives 1 kilometer from my home. She has a partner called Mark. My husband's called Mark. She has 2 cats. I have 2 cats. We are exactly the same age. We are pretty similar in character and personality. We have the same likes and dislikes. And I said, of course she can call me. Without a doubt, but please don't put her on the phone to me unless you're sure that she's facing something as kind of grave as, an ocular melanoma diagnosis, but also enucleation of the eye, because there's so many other things, obviously kind of radiation options that can be involved if it's not so far progressed. And our mutual friend said, no, I think she is actually facing that. So anyway, Jo, she's phoned me minutes later. Turns out we have the same ocular oncologist, Professor Segur at Moorfields. We have the same oncologist, who's obviously for the surveillance and monitoring mostly of the liver, and same ocularist dealing with our prosthetics. So actually at that time, she was waiting to hear her diagnosis, but unfortunately she did get an ocular melanoma diagnosis, and a year and 2 weeks to the day, probably in the same room she probably stayed in the same room in Moorfields. She had exactly the same operation as I did by the same person. And the parallels in our lives have just been extraordinary. We've become great friends since. And actually we've written together about it in the Times, which is a national editorial newspaper over here. And we've been on BBC Women's Hour to talk about our friendship and stuff like that. So it's so rare. Talking about the rare nature of the cancer, but yet we have these kind of strange coincidental parallel things going on so close. So that's a little bit out of the ordinary.
That is really funny. And it's funny how the world works and brings people together. We actually had a post on our Facebook page not too long ago about how rare it was. I think it was maybe for Rare Cancer Day. And somebody commented, I don't think it's really that rare because I know all these people in my town that have it. And we were like, no, it really is that rare. I don't know. Like it's the world's weird.
Yeah. And then you're like, well, is it something in the water?
I don't know.
So I think that is an important point is, how do we get to the bottom of how this is caused? And I know sometimes you just have to reconcile yourself with the fact that it's just biological bad luck and there's a glitch in the system and it's nothing deeper than that. I remember I'm constantly searching for answers for the first 12 months. It actually drove me a bit nuts because I just was like, well, if I know what's caused this, then I can kind of do something to combat, those negative causes and perhaps stave off any negative consequences of this all. And I think it puts you firmly more in control in a situation where you feel completely out of control. But I've asked far and wide and we still haven't got to the bottom of it. My oncologist who's in charge of my surveillance and monitoring really did make me laugh because I think he's, for the 10th time that I was saying, so, what have I done? What have I done? And again, to my point of the news and the constant narratives about middle-aged cancer. And he just turned to me and said, oh, were you a pilot? Like this, completely seriously. And I'm like, nope, that's not been on my career list, pilot. He's like, oh, I was just thinking, maybe if you've been a pilot, the radiation exposure, something like that. And I'm like, no. So even he's like, everyone's kind of clutching at straws still. I don't know if that's the case in the US. Something perhaps to do with my Irish heritage, pale skin and blue eyes has been mentioned as most, as in terms of the demographic, of people who are more likely to get ocular melanoma, and possibly a freckle, which I mentioned at the very, very beginning, that's gone rogue, a bit like I suppose skin cancer starts. So yeah, getting to the bottom of it is difficult. As I said, maybe, in my case, something in the water in our local area.
Yeah, I mean, you never can tell. And I think originally, I think they thought sun exposure, and now they're thinking that's not even a factor, or maybe it's not as much of a factor, and they still don't really know. So I think it is important not to blame yourself. Try to, live as healthy of a lifestyle as you can, like we all try to do, but definitely make sure you're not blaming yourself. And yeah, hopefully one day they'll figure it out and we'll know. But
yeah, and then the sun, I suppose, the sun point, that's the first thing I said, because of course melanoma, skin melanoma, I've got pale skin, things like that, but apparently not, as the latest sort of findings, but who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
You can't beat yourself up because there's so many other things that are on your kind of worry, anxiety list. So that needs to be put to the bottom. And actually, I was, listening to some of your episodes from, I think it's like the sort of nutritionist and well-being expert and things like that. And it's just about doing everything you can daily just to be as healthy as possible. And I guess as robust as possible if, treatment and surgery comes your way, but not blaming yourself and shaming yourself for something that you'll never know that whether you did or not.
Absolutely. We can only try our best, and we do every day. Tell us, where are you now and going into the future?
Yeah, so I would say I'm in a state of limbo, which is, I will take it. I'm, limbo is fine for me after the kind of shock and awe of March 2023 and recovery. I have a liver MRI every 6 months. And so I'm kept a very close eye on, and we wait and see. And that's literally all I can report on that front. It's a strange existence. I'm so hugely very grateful that I didn't have, like other cancers, that you go straight into some very strong chemotherapy system, and there's ocular melanoma is so very different, isn't it? It's like, all the conventional cancer treatments that you've ever heard of, or someone you love go through, kind of don't really apply. And it's a very different type of cancer, and it's in the way it kind of manifests and then progresses. I sit and wait and hope that doesn't come my way, but obviously you have to be sort of very aware of the fact that it might. But try and keep anxiety at bay and hope for the best. People on clinical trials over here, so there are the very beginnings of clinical trials, which have been pretty groundbreaking and I guess quite similar to the immunotherapy we talked about skin cancer. And you'll know more because I know that you sort of deep dive into the latest sort of pioneering treatments stuff in your podcast. But yes, I do know people who are kind of on clinical trials or being monitored so that they can be put straight onto the immunotherapy trial, the moment anything changes. It's comforting to know that there are some changes and advances, but for now, I find that I'm on a 6-monthly cycle of I live to see another 6 months and then we go again.
Well, I'm very glad that everything is going well so far, and I'm glad that you're here to share your story. And I love that you've been able to write about it and go on the BBC. I think those are all such wonderful things. Tell us a little bit about that.
The first thing I wanted to do was go and crawl under a rock for a really long period of time. As I mentioned, I really couldn't even say the words out loud. It just was also, I don't know, it was so it was so shocking. But again, this sort of so niche and so unheard of. It was just a lot to take in and to understand. I didn't have anyone to talk to and go, well, you've had this. And there's no comparison. There's no cancer competition. None of it's good. But, if I had breast cancer, for example, then I would be able to be either know or be given a whole list of friends or, connections that I could speak to and have a reference point and ask the questions. But it's quite a lonely disease actually, because until I met Jo, of course, my one-eyed comrade, as I call her, because there's just no one that I know, and even who hasn't had ocular melanoma but has an eye prosthetic or something. There was just no one to talk to. And so I think for a really quite a long time it's just about quietness and being surrounded by love, which is one of the positives and amazing things to come out of it, is that you are so protected and supported and things like that. And then actually after about I'd written, because I'm a journalist, I'd sort of written quite a lot down. It just felt like a cathartic experience for me. I just wrote tons and tons and tons of stuff. It really helped me. And then I kind of revisited it about a year later and I was like, you know what? It's not ideal that it's my life, but it's a really compelling story. And I know that there's quite a few lessons as well to learn for people. And, I think it could really help people, because there is this kind of middle-aged cancer narrative going on in the UK media, certainly. And it's like a near daily thing. You can't really move for another story of this and that and this and that. So I wrote about my experiences at the Times. I've been on radio shows, BBC Women's Hour, things like that. And I've been really trying to spread the word actually ever since. And I felt it's really given me some bit of a mission and something really positive to come out of something negative. So I'm co-authoring a book as well with a fellow journalist. We need to get it commissioned actually. So if anyone's listening, probably needs to start in the UK market, so maybe not of relevance. But we over here, you have to have an agent, and then you need to get it commissioned and go through the process. We could just write it, but I'd much rather go through the normal conventional channels. But the thing that we found that was missing was not, I suppose there's lots of really good cancer self-help books that was so helpful and useful to us when we were going through it. My colleague, my co-author, had prostate cancer. But the thing that was missing was something to help everyone around us, because everyone wanted to support in any way they could. They wanted to do the right thing, but they don't know how. They don't know how to do it right and how to help well, because it's such a sort of difficult situation all around. It's so highly sensitive. And actually, because I'm in communications, I sort of did a kind of crisis comms plan for all my friends, and I'm like, do this, don't do that, say that, don't do that. And they, poor things, couldn't, even breathe or move an inch for fear of getting it wrong. But the book is all about how to help support people going through a cancer or living with cancer well and in the right way, kind of kind and practical guide. And we're going to include, oncologists, carers, psychologists, people with cancer, people caring for people with cancer from the very beginning of like diagnosis actually through to death, and having some quite candid conversations about how to support in the right way, because everyone wants to do the right thing, but it's so easy, and I've done it myself in the past, to do the right, the wrong thing, say the wrong thing. Cancer cliches, cancer clangers are ubiquitous really when you're going through this. So yeah, that's kind of my next project, to keep kind of spreading the word. And I am an ambassador for an eye charity over here as well. So trying to sort of raise awareness of that charity, and also raise funds. So by doing some crazy things, I'm climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania in February. So yeah, no rest. After a period of quiet, I'm now, no rest.
My goodness, you are a busy lady. Well, I love to hear all of that. That's fantastic. Do you want to give us some links that we can share to your socials or the charity that you support or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. So my Instagram is seeing_life_clearly, which is Tessa Parry-Wingfield as well, to make sure you've got the right one. And my charity that I'm ambassador and support is the Victoria Cohen Eye Cancer Charitable Trust, the BCECCT. That's a really long name. Now, they do great work because they provide the funds for education for aspiring ocular oncologists, but in places in the world where they don't have any. So, in some countries, if you've got an ocular melanoma diagnosis, it would be awful, because there wouldn't be anyone for you to go to with this kind of specialist expertise. So I feel really passionate about that charity. It's humble, but small and humble, but also very mighty and doing great work. I have my own platform, which is to do with all the kind of storytelling aspects and the speaker gigs that I do to try and spread the word, which kind of houses everything that I've written about so far, if people are interested, which is tessaparry-wingfield.com.
Fantastic. And we will link all of those in the show notes. So if you want, you can just pop down there and check them out. Tessa, is there anything else that you want to cover before we wrap up?
Very happy to be in touch with anyone they want to chat through whenever I do any article or podcast or radio. I think it's really important to keep the channels open. I really, really think that sharing stories makes people feel less alone. And I know that sort of helped me through my kind of diagnosis and surgery, was kind of, knowing that other people out there, and the advice that they would give, which is often, quite raw and candid. What would I say to people? That it's been horrendous, but also not all awful. Because you do, so as to my Instagram account name, Seeing Life Clearly, and with the irony of having one eye, which is -8 myopic, it does give you, a huge kind of jolt, I suppose, to make the most of everything. And I think it gives you great clarity on what matters, what's important, who you should surround yourself with, what you want to do with your life, the things that matter. Maybe it's a cliche, but it certainly has happened for me. So I see that as a positive, being given a bit of a kick up the butt to just get on with stuff and not let life sort of pass you by. Yeah, so I think that's probably what I would say as a sort of closing remark.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here. Like I said, I will link everything in the show notes so everyone can follow along. I think your story is amazing, and I'm just very grateful that you came to share it with us and help us raise awareness. So thank you so much for that.
No, well, thank you for having me. I think you're doing great work over there. I think it's quite interesting. I'd love to know a bit more about what's going on in the US, but I'm sure it's, similar or parallels. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of exciting clinical trials coming up. We just did a webinar and it is in editing right now. Hopefully by the time you guys all watch this, it will have been posted. There's a lot of great information, but we're constantly bringing doctors on the podcast and the webinars with the latest information. So follow along and watch the things that we put out. And it really is fascinating the progress they're making. We just launched our biobank. Our biobank with pattern.org is now live. So anybody watching, please go check that out. It is amazing because it seamlessly integrates with your registry account. So if you go to our registry, the Insight registry, and you register, and then you go to the biobank and you submit a sample, those two will actually integrate and talk to each other. And this whole thing is really going to help progress the research, advancements, treatment. It's going to be a big deal. So we have a lot of great stuff in the works on our end, as well as a lot of great clinical trials. And we're constantly having doctors come and just talk on our platform so that we can get the information out. And so with that, I encourage everyone to please follow us not only on YouTube, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, but also on our social media outlets, because without the followers and the viewers, we can't get sponsored to continue doing this. So if you like the content we're bringing you, not only follow us, but watch it. Even if you put one of our playlists on and just leave it on all day, we don't care. But the views are what helps us get the sponsors. And then that's what brings you this free education, basically. So please, 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 everyone watching, go subscribe, watch, leave us a comment and a heart. That would be amazing. And then let's talk a little bit more about resources as we close out. If you are looking for someone to talk to in this community, we have several Facebook groups. Please join us on Facebook if you're on the platform. Also, we have a Tuesday night Zoom meeting every Tuesday. There are 2 rooms, a regular room and a metastatic room. So you can come and talk to other people who have ocular melanoma in that Zoom every Tuesday night. And then also subscribe to our newsletter. If you go to our website, ocurinsight.org, there's a button at the top to subscribe. We send out a newsletter once a month with all of this information. So if you're not into social media, that's fine. Subscribe to the newsletter. We also send out a few other emails throughout the month if it's something very important. We don't spam you. So please sign up for the newsletter, visit us in Zoom, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and just keep watching so we can keep bringing you this great information. You guys all have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week.